This one has also been around for a long time, and it's easy to ignore the basic principles behind successful stories, behind successful sales messages, and behind successful messages on a grand scale. And this is one of them. Okay. And I show this to you because it's likely that you've heard this process before, um, but I want to make it very clear that this is all that's required, right? So in the beginning, when I said you don't have to be the best, you don't have to be, the Stephen King of writing emails, right? You just have to be good enough and hit on these points, go through this process, because there's a flow that your reader needs to go through emotionally, intellectually, and logically, that they will then make a purchase through that process. Okay. But again, this all starts with having the right people, and it all starts with having a really killer offer, so that when they see what you're offering, it's almost like, why didn't I think of this myself? Like that thought process when you're coming up with the offer, or the the package that you're going to be promoting, the thought should be, why didn't I think of this myself? Right? And I always, there's a few examples around my house of things that we've just bought. If you go to the As Seen on TV store, or you go to any of like the bath stores, or these like kitchen places that have all the gadgets that you've seen on TV, you walk around and you're like, I was thinking about that. And if that is where your offer can kind of simmer in, then you have something that's a winner, and then you can layer on proper copywriting and proper salesmanship in print that will help take that to the next level. All right, so let's go through attention, interest, desire, and action, and where it relates to your emails. All right, so in every email, like we talked about last time, we talked more about the story of how you can flow a story into a lesson. But every single email that you write is going to have these four parts, every single one. And I want you to start with these four parts in mind. Even have a document, like a text document, or wherever you write your emails, or wherever, and this can even be for blog posts, for Facebook ads, for any sort of sales message will go through this format. So attention, this is going to be where we stop, and I'm going to write this, where we stop our customer, we stop our prospect in their tracks. All right. I want them to go through their email inbox, see my message, and say, I need to know what is inside that email. Right. So this is step one. The only purpose of the subject line, is to get the email opened. That is the only reason whatsoever. And after this, I'm going to go through a couple of examples of where you can get great subject lines, great ideas for getting attention in the inbox. And this is for mainly, it works for everybody, but what I try to focus on is pre-selling the lead that I generate, so that once somebody is putting their email into whatever box that I have on the internet, they already know to expect an email from me. The name that it's coming from is important enough that whatever the subject is, they still want to know, because it's coming from me and it's information that they've requested. So your name is almost an unsung hero, right? The from name that your email is from, that's your ultimate attention grabber. Okay, so if we even put that, I'd put that as number one, and your subject as number two. Okay, because sometimes I'll just put hey, or information inside, and I still get my emails open, because the person that is on the other end, they know what I'm sending, they know the type of information I send, and whatever I send, they want to consume, and they want to have that information. However, there's also other people that aren't really sold yet on who you are or your program or your product or service. So you need to instill uh, a little bit of salesmanship in that subject line. And I'm going to show you some really cool resources where every time you're writing an email, I always go to these places and I say, okay, I'm writing an email about oxygen therapy, and I give that example because it's an actual email that I was writing. So I look for information about that, and I find email subjects, and I'm going to give this to you. So just stick around. Now, the next thing, once you have someone's attention, is you got to maintain their interest, and this is where the story and your kind of lesson comes into play, right? So I always try to wrap something around a story of either something in my life, a movie, pop culture, a book, something of interest to my target market that I can speak about, and then weave that into a lesson. Okay. Now I'm going to go through this after in a little bit more detail. But the story that you tell, the hey, here's some information about laptop tables. Funny story, right? When I was sitting on my couch, I started to hear something burning or smell something burning, and you go along this story. You can't then be selling, a picture frame. You can't be selling something that is totally unrelated to the story. And I say this, it sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but I see it happening all the time, where I get emails from people that are well-meaning, they have great products, but they're trying to be a little bit too crafty, right? They're trying to be a little bit too cute, and they start telling stories about random things, and then there's no way to bridge that story into why your customer would actually want what you're selling. Okay, and that brings us to that next phase of desire. You have to be able to bridge the story that you're telling to what you're actually selling. All right, so I'll show you a couple of examples after, but one of them was that what was a story about Rudy. Okay, and if you came here through the webinar that I ran, one of the stories that I talk about is the story of Rudy in Notre Dame. And I always use his story, right? Because he was the underdog, right? He was the underdog. Underdog. He was, a hometown hero. Really, started from behind the eight ball and went to win, right? So there's a great story there, especially if you're selling something that deals in transformation and deals in markets where you're working with people that need to believe in themselves. Okay, so telling stories about people who have overcome obstacles, adversities, and their circumstances, people who have gone from rags to riches. Those type of stories doesn't have to be about money, but it has to be that they started somewhere where all the odds were against them and they actually overcame that to do something great. Those stories are fantastic if you're selling something that provides transformation. All right. Or it provides, or if it requires somebody to make a decision that maybe is a little bit outside their comfort zone, or maybe the pricing of your product is a little bit steeper than what people are usually about to buy. So using stories like that are going to help people believe that, yes, you know what, I have to step up, I have to do this. This is my last chance, and then we can use the future pacing of what if I don't do this? What are the consequences of not doing this? The same thing with with the weight loss. What are the consequences of not doing this, right? And then putting someone at almost a fork in the road and saying you can go through path A is being where you are right now. Path B is with us. Click here and learn how you can overcome whatever problem they had, however I agitated it, and here's your solution. Click here right now. Here's how we're going to solve this for you, right? So that process right there is is really powerful when you get this, when you get every aspect of it. If you start with an interesting story, but you haven't got their attention, you haven't given them relevance, right? Why are they? Why are you telling them the story? Like, what are you talking about? So giving them a little bit of an intro and saying, here, I want to let you know of something that happened to me yesterday, and I gave the story of meeting my friend at the mall, right? I had to tell you that story in order for you to understand the concepts that we just talked about with respect to future pacing, negative consequences. Okay, so I had to tell you that story because if I went through it now, it would have number one, you wouldn't be in the right frame of mind to listen to that right now. Number two, we just went through a story of overcoming something, so we have to have an order of emotion that somebody's going through. All right, so here we go. All right, so here's where I get my best subject lines.